The mysterious stranger. The Florida sun was just beginning its descent, casting warm, golden rays across the quiet streets of Sunridge. In this small, close-knit town, secrets were rare, and life moved to the gentle rhythm of a southern drawl. For Josh Mitchell, a humble mechanic running his late father's garage, life was predictable and straightforward. Day after day, he found solace in the clinks and clatters of machinery, where problems could be solved with the right tools and a bit of hard work. But this evening, something extraordinary was about to shake up Josh's familiar routine. Just as he was locking up for the day, his eye caught a faint, unearthly glow in the distance, a soft, flickering blue light a mile down the road. Driven by a sudden spark of curiosity, Josh climbed into his old Chevy truck and rumbled down the gravel road, the crunch of rocks beneath his tires the only sound breaking the silence of the evening. As he drew closer to the source of the glow, Josh's heart began to race. There, standing alone by the side of the road, was a woman unlike anyone he'd ever seen. Her skin shimmered in the fading light with an almost ethereal blue, and her dark hair cascaded like inky waves down her back. She wore a silvery, close-fitting suit that gleamed as if woven from the stars. But it was her eyes that held him captive, deep, reflective pools that conveyed fear, determination, and something ancient yet fragile. "Hey there, you all right?" Josh called, trying to sound steady as he stepped out of the truck. The woman turned to him, her gaze unreadable. A long, tense silence stretched between them before she finally spoke. "I am lost. I need help," she said in a voice so soft it almost disappeared into the evening air. Her words were laced with an accent he couldn't place. Josh moved a step closer, glancing around as if someone else might be lurking in the shadows. "You want me to call someone? An ambulance or the police?" "No police," she said quickly, a hint of panic flashing in her eyes. "Please, just somewhere safe, just for a little while." Though alarm bells went off in his head, Josh couldn't shake the feeling that she was genuinely in trouble. "All right," he said slowly, nodding. "You can stay with me for the night, but we'll need to talk. What's your name?" "Myla," she replied, almost hesitating over the syllables, as if they were new to her. "My name is Myla." Josh led her to his truck, opened the passenger door, and watched as she gracefully slid inside. With the soft blue glow of twilight fading around them, he drove in silence, glancing occasionally at Myla, who gazed out the window, lost in thought. When they arrived at Josh's modest home on the outskirts of Sunridge, he was acutely aware of the strangeness of it all. The small single-story house had seen better days, but its peeling paint and worn-out furniture radiated a warmth and comfort he cherished. As Myla settled onto his warm couch, he offered her a glass of water, unsure what else to do. "So, Myla, where are you from?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. Myla looked down at the glass in her hand, her fingers trembling slightly. "I am not from here, not from Earth." She glanced up, watching his reaction, her deep eyes wary and cautious. Josh blinked, taken aback, as the words sank in. He opened his mouth to respond, but found himself speechless. Sensing his disbelief, Myla took a breath and began explaining, her voice quiet but steady. She was from a distant planet named Solara, on the run from a tyrant who sought to control her people and force her into an unwanted alliance. As she spoke, Josh listened, piecing together the gravity of her situation. Her people had fled a looming threat from a neighboring planet, but her escape to Earth was fraught with danger. With nowhere else to turn, Myla sought refuge among humans, hoping to blend in and evade capture. As she finished, Josh felt a strange, protective instinct well up within him. "All right," he said finally, meeting her gaze with a seriousness he hadn't felt in years. "You can stay here, but if anyone asks, you're my wife. It'll keep folks from getting nosy." For a moment, Myla's eyes widened in surprise, but then a small smile touched her lips. "Thank you, Josh. I don't know how to repay you." With a dismissive shrug, he managed a faint grin, trying to play it cool. "Don't worry about it. Just get some rest. you're safe here." As night fell and Mila settled into the guest room, Josh found himself lying awake, staring at the ceiling. Just hours ago, he was a simple mechanic with a quiet life, and now an alien woman was sleeping in his house, bringing with her secrets from beyond the stars. The strangeness of it all filled him with an unexpected thrill. Something extraordinary was unfolding, and he was right in the middle of it. Little did Josh know that this was only the beginning. The journey that lay ahead would change his life forever, taking him far beyond anything he had ever imagined, into a world of intrigue, danger, and a connection that defied logic. As he drifted off to sleep, the image of Mila's luminous blue eyes lingered in his mind, and he knew deep down that his life was about to take a wild, irrevocable turn. The cover story. As dawn broke over Sunridge, the quiet town began to stir with the first signs of a new day. The familiar sounds of birds chirping and distant cars passing on the highway seeped through Josh's small home. Groggy, he stretched and let the memory of last night come back to him. The mysterious, otherworldly Milo was still asleep in his guest room, a reality that felt more like a strange, vivid dream than his usual morning routine. Josh shuffled into the kitchen to start his day, brewing a pot of coffee as he mentally pieced together what he knew about Mila. She was from a planet called Solara, on the run from a powerful tyrant named Zizi, who wanted to force her into a political marriage. That much Josh could grasp, but why she'd chosen Earth, and what it meant for her and his quiet life here, left 100 questions unanswered. As he poured himself a mug of coffee, Josh was startled to find Mila standing in the doorway, watching him with a soft, tentative smile. She wore the oversized clothes he'd dug up from his closet, a plain t-shirt and faded jeans that somehow looked elegant on her. Despite her alien appearance, Mila's expression and demeanor seemed incredibly human, filled with curiosity and a quiet determination to adapt. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying that melodic lilt. "Morning," Josh replied, offering her a cup of coffee, which she accepted cautiously. "How'd you sleep?" Mila took a small sip, her eyes widening at the unfamiliar taste. "Not well," she admitted, setting the cup down carefully. "Too many thoughts racing through my mind. About Zizi, about this place." Her gaze softened as she looked at him. "And about you. You've taken a great risk to help me, Josh." Josh shrugged, feeling slightly embarrassed. "It's no big deal. I wasn't about to leave you stranded out there." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in thought. But reality pressed down quickly. If they were going to pull off this cover story of Mila being his wife, they'd need a plan, and fast. Sunridge wasn't the type of place where newcomers went unnoticed, and questions were bound to arise. Josh cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "So, about this whole married couple thing," he said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "If we're going to make this believable, we need to work out some details." Mila nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, we need a backstory, something simple but believable. Tell me, how do marriages work here?" The question caught Josh off guard. He opened his mouth to explain, only to realize he wasn't quite sure where to start. "Well, it's complicated," he said, stumbling over his words. "Basically, two people decide they want to be together. There's a ceremony, a lot of legal stuff, and usually family and friends asking endless questions." Mila listened intently, her face thoughtful. "So, to blend in, we need to know each other well. People will ask how we met, why we chose to live here." She trailed off, her gaze growing distant. "It must sound strange to you, this arrangement." "Yeah, it's definitely not what I'm used to," Josh admitted with a chuckle. "But don't worry, we'll come up with something simple." He took a seat at the kitchen table, motioning for her to join him. "Let's say we met while I was traveling abroad. People around here know I haven't been in a serious relationship for a while, so we can keep the details vague." Mila raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a small smile. "Abroad, you say? And where would that be?" "Oh, I don't know, maybe Europe?" Josh suggested, scratching his chin as he thought it through. It's far enough away that people here won't pry too much. We'll say you moved back here with me to start fresh. Sunridge is full of people who want a quiet life, so it'll make sense. Europe, Mila repeated thoughtfully, nodding as she mulled over the idea. That works. And as for why we're here, Josh shrugged. We'll say we wanted a simple life away from the city, nothing flashy. That's why we chose Sunridge. You're helping me out with the garage while getting used to living here. It's a little unusual, but I think it'll pass. They spent the rest of the morning weaving together their cover story, each adding little details that made it more believable. Josh found himself increasingly fascinated by Mila's curiosity about Earth's customs. She asked questions about everything: what humans ate, how they worked, how relationships functioned. It was clear that Mila had a deep thirst for understanding, a trait that only strengthened Josh's resolve to help her. Later that day, Josh took Mila into town for the first time. She'd insisted it was necessary to get familiar with the place, and Josh agreed, knowing they needed to establish themselves as a couple. The small town buzzed with quiet activity, people running errands, greeting each other on the street. As they strolled along, Mila held onto his arm, her eyes darting around, absorbing every detail. They stopped at the local diner for lunch, a favorite hangout where Josh was well known. As they entered, a few of the regulars looked up, surprised to see Josh with a companion. Curious glances followed them as they took a seat at a booth near the window. "Josh, it's good to see you with company for once," said Linda, the diner's friendly waitress. Her warm smile grew even wider when she glanced at Mila. "And who's this?" Josh felt his face flush, but he managed a grin. "Linda, this is my wife, Mila. She just moved here from Europe." Linda's eyes sparkled with interest. "Oh, how lovely. Welcome to Sunridge, Mila." She leaned closer, whispering as if sharing a secret. "You'll find it's a quiet town, but there's a charm to it. I think you'll like it here." "Thank you, Linda," Mila replied, her voice soft but sincere. She smiled, and Josh noticed how easily she could disarm people with her warmth. Linda continued chatting, asking about their plans in town and what they thought of Sunridge so far. Josh and Mila played their parts seamlessly, laughing and joking as they answered questions, their ease surprising even Josh. By the time they left the diner, it was as if they'd been married for years, their chemistry undeniable even to the townsfolk. They spent the afternoon wandering around, introducing Mila to the sights and sounds of her new home. She was endlessly curious, asking questions about everything from the town's history to the mechanics of everyday objects. The simplest things, like traffic lights and soda machines, fascinated her, and Josh found himself laughing more than he had in years, her wonder contagious. That night, they returned home exhausted but happy, having established their story and laid the foundation for their cover. As they settled in for dinner, Josh couldn't help but feel a strange sense of contentment. Despite the bizarre circumstances, he was enjoying Mila's company more than he could admit, even to himself. As they cleaned up, a comfortable silence settled between them. Mila suddenly paused, looking over at Josh with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "Josh," she began softly, "I know this situation is unusual, but I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything you've done. I came here with nothing, running from people who would harm me, and now I have someone willing to protect me." Josh shifted, feeling the weight of her gratitude but unsure how to respond. "You're welcome, but honestly, it's nice to have someone around. I didn't realize how quiet this place was until you showed up." Maya nodded, smiling faintly. "You've given me hope, Josh. I don't know how long we have until Zessie's agents catch up to me, but while I'm here, I want to live, to truly experience what life here on Earth has to offer." The evening stretched on with the quiet intimacy of shared thoughts and newfound companionship. As the stars glittered in the night sky outside, Josh realized he was in the midst of something bigger than himself. He knew they were only just beginning a journey fraught with unknown dangers, but in that moment, he felt ready for anything. Shadows of the past. The following days slipped into a comfortable routine, with Josh and Mila settling into their new roles as a married couple in Sunridge. They played their parts well, appearing at town gatherings, sharing quiet dinners at the local diner, and offering explanations to curious neighbors about Mila's arrival. Each day, Josh was more at ease with their charade, and Layla's presence felt more natural, as if she'd always been a part of his life. But beneath the surface, Josh couldn't ignore the lingering tension. Mila's gaze would often drift to the horizon, her brows furrowed in worry, and though she was careful not to speak about her past too much, Josh knew that her time on Earth came with risks. He had begun to suspect that Mila's arrival hadn't gone unnoticed, not by her people, nor by those who wanted her to return to Salara. One crisp evening, as they shared dinner in his cozy living room, Mila's usual relaxed expression shifted, a look of concern clouding her features. Josh immediately picked up on it. "You all right?" he asked, setting down his fork. Mila hesitated, her gaze dropping to her plate. "Josh, there's something I need to tell you, something that could affect you as well." She took a deep breath, as though steadying herself. "I felt watched, even here. There are agents, Zeus's people, who might be searching for me. They've been tracking me across planets, and if they find us, I fear for what they'll do." Josh leaned forward, his expression hardening with resolve. "Then we'll handle it together. I'm not letting anyone hurt you, Mila. Not if I can help it." Mila smiled faintly, grateful for his support, but her eyes betrayed a deeper worry. "Thank you, Josh. But Zeus's agents are highly trained, and their technology is advanced. Hiding from them might only buy us time. Eventually, they'll close in." Josh knew the risk, but felt determined to keep Mila safe, no matter the cost. He leaned back, staring out the window at the quiet town. "Then we'll need a plan, something that keeps us ahead of them." But just as he spoke, a sound broke the stillness of the night, a faint, persistent buzzing. Josh looked up, his senses on high alert. Mila froze, her eyes wide, and they both exchanged a glance. The sound grew louder, closer, until Josh pinpointed it coming from somewhere outside the house. Without a word, he motioned for Mila to stay put and cautiously moved toward the front door. Cracking it open, he squinted into the darkness, his heart pounding. A sleek, dark car sat parked across the street, its windows tinted and its headlights dim. He felt the unmistakable prickle of being watched. Returning to the living room, he found Mila waiting, her face a mixture of fear and determination. "They're here, aren't they?" she whispered, gripping the edge of her chair. "I think so," Josh replied, his jaw tight. "But they're not making any moves. They're just watching." Mila took a shaky breath. That's how they operate. First, they observe, assess their target. They don't act until they know exactly who they're dealing with. "Then we'll make them think they're wrong about us," Josh said, his mind racing. "If they're looking for someone dangerous, let's give them something ordinary. A quiet couple who lives a dull life. Nothing to see here." Maya nodded, but Josh could tell she was struggling to remain calm. Her hands trembled, and she clasped them tightly to keep steady. "It's a good idea," she said, her voice firm. "But if they suspect anything, if they think I'm the one they're looking for..." She trailed off, glancing toward the back door. "There's a place we could go. Remote, away from prying eyes. It's where I first landed on Earth." Josh's curiosity piqued. "A landing site. Does it have any equipment? Maybe something we could use to reach out to your people?" Maya nodded. "Yes. There's a communication device there, though it's risky to use. Zizi could intercept it. But if I can reach the Salara resistance, they might have ways to get me off Earth before Zeus's forces find me." A surge of determination flooded Josh. He stood up, reaching for the keys to his truck. "Then we're going tonight. Grab what you need, and let's get out of here." They moved quickly, packing only the essentials, clothes, some food, and a few keepsakes. Josh glanced around his home, a bittersweet feeling settling over him. He wasn't sure if he'd ever return, but the thought didn't faze him. His loyalty was with Mila now, her safety the only thing that mattered. As they climbed into his old truck, Josh cast one last look at the sleek car parked across the street. It hadn't moved, but he could almost feel the invisible eyes watching their every move. With a deep breath, he started the engine and pulled onto the road, leaving the comfort of his hometown behind and venturing into the unknown. They drove through the night, the quiet hum of the engine the only sound in the vast, empty expanse of the countryside. The landscape shifted from the dense greenery of Sunridge to the sprawling open plains of the southwest. Mila remained silent for most of the journey, her face set in a look of focused determination. Josh couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger than they could comprehend, but he pushed those thoughts aside, concentrating instead on the road ahead. Several hours later, as dawn approached, they arrived at a desolate stretch of land, the horizon tinted pink by the first light of day. Mila directed him to an isolated area, hidden from the main road by thick clusters of cacti and rocks. "This is it," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the wind that whipped across the open plain. "My landing site." Josh stepped out of the truck, taking in the barren surroundings. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about the area, just miles of dust and scrubland stretching out in every direction. But as Mila led him toward a cluster of rocks, he noticed a faint shimmer in the air, as if the very fabric of reality was warped. With a few quick movements, Mila activated a hidden control panel embedded within the rocks, revealing a small, sleek device that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. She knelt down, her fingers brushing the surface of the device with a tenderness that made Josh realize just how much it meant to her. "This is the communicator," she explained, glancing over at him. "It can send a signal strong enough to reach Solara, but there's a chance Zessie's people will intercept it. It's a risk, but if they know I'm contacting my people, it might buy us time." Josh nodded, his gaze steady. "Do it. It's our best chance." Mila took a deep breath, her hands hovering over the controls as she adjusted the settings. Josh watched as her face became a mask of concentration, her fingers moving deftly over the buttons and switches. The device began to hum, a soft, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air around them. Just as she finished entering the final coordinates, a shadow fell over them. Josh looked up, his heart racing, to see a dark shape looming on the horizon. A sleek, unmarked vehicle speeding toward them, kicking up a trail of dust in its wake. "Mila," he warned, his voice tense. "We've got company." Mila's face paled, but she didn't stop. "Just a few more seconds," she murmured, her focus unwavering. The vehicle drew closer, its headlights piercing the early morning light. Josh clenched his fists, readying himself for whatever was coming. He knew they were outmatched, but he wasn't about to abandon Mila now. With one last tap, Mila sent the signal, and the communicator emitted a high-pitched chime. She looked up at Josh, her expression a mixture of relief and determination. "It's done," she said. "The signal's out. Now we just have tow." Her words were cut off as the vehicle skidded to a halt a few yards away, and 3 men stepped out, each dressed in dark suits that contrasted sharply with the dusty landscape. The man in the lead, a tall figure with cold, calculating eyes, took a step forward, his gaze fixed on Mila with an unsettling intensity. "Mila of Solara," he called out, his voice carrying an air of authority. "You're coming with us. Surrender peacefully, and no harm will come to you." Mila clenched her fists, stepping protectively in front of the communicator. "I won't go back," she said defiantly. "Tell Zessie he'll have to find another pawn." The man smirked, his gaze flicking to Josh. "And who's this?" "Your protector." He laughed, a mocking sound that made Josh's blood boil. "You don't stand a chance against us, human. Stand aside, and we might let you live." Josh felt his jaw tighten, every instinct screaming at him to fight. But Mila placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch calming him. She turned to the man, her voice steady and unyielding. "If you harm him, you'll answer to me." The man's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, his demeanor shifting from arrogance to a more dangerous edge. "Very well," he said coldly. "Have it your way." Before Josh could react, the man raised a small metallic device, and a flash of light erupted from it, casting a blinding glow across the landscape. Josh shielded his eyes, but when he looked up again, Mila had vanished, leaving nothing but an empty expanse of dust and silence in her place. Into the unknown. The blinding light faded, leaving a hollow silence in its wake. Josh's heart raced as he blinked away the lingering brightness, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. He turned, scanning the landscape, but Milo was nowhere to be seen. Panic surged through him. She had vanished, taken by those shadowy figures as quickly as a wisp of smoke disappearing in the wind. "No," he whispered, disbelief settling into cold dread. For a moment, he stood frozen, staring at the empty spot where Mila had been only seconds ago. But as the reality sank in, his shock gave way to a fierce determination. Mila was gone, but he couldn't, and wouldn't, let her remain lost to those who meant her harm. He sprinted to the small communicator she'd left behind, its surface still faintly pulsing with energy. With a shaky breath, he knelt down and examined the device. While he had no idea how to operate it, he knew it was his only link to Mila and whatever world she had come from. He had no choice but to take it with him. He might not know how it worked, but maybe someone, somehow, could help him decode it. He grabbed the communicator and made his way back to the truck, his thoughts racing. He couldn't go to the authorities. They wouldn't believe him, and involving them might only put Mila in more danger. He realized that if he was going to help her, he'd have to do it alone, trusting only his instincts and the meager resources at his disposal. As he started the truck and headed back toward town, he mentally mapped out a plan. He needed information, and there was one place in Sunridge that might have the answers he sought, the small, local library. It wasn't much, but it held old archives and records, some of which, if he was lucky, might offer some insight into strange phenomena or unexplained disappearances in the area. If Zessie's people had been here before, there was a slim chance they'd left some trace behind. The library was empty, its quiet halls echoing with the sound of his footsteps. He quickly scanned the shelves, searching for anything related to unidentified flying objects, unexplained events, or conspiracy theories. He found a dusty old section filled with books on folklore and urban legends, flipping through pages until a familiar word caught his eye: lights. He read about accounts of strange blue lights seen in the night sky, rumored sightings of figures with unusual appearances, and tales of people who claimed to have seen beings that defied earthly description. But as intriguing as the information was, it felt scattered and thin, barely enough to piece together a full picture of what was happening. Frustrated, Josh returned the books to the shelf and began searching through the library's online archives. He typed in keywords: unidentified lights, disappearances, alien sightings. One article, buried deep in the archives, caught his attention. It described a mysterious group calling itself the Intergalactic Enforcement Commission, an unofficial, secretive organization that was rumored to have been involved in high-profile disappearances over the years. It was a story out of science fiction, but the mention of their alleged methods sounded eerily similar to what Josh had witnessed. Intergalactic Enforcement Commission, he muttered to himself. Could it be the organization that had taken Mela? He was almost certain of it. As he read further, he discovered that this commission allegedly had operatives in major cities, blending into society under the guise of government agents. They were highly trained, equipped with advanced technology, and held the authority to enforce laws across galaxies. They didn't just track down fugitives, they sought to maintain intergalactic order, often through extreme measures. A cold realization washed over him. These people weren't just Zessie's hired goons. They were something much more powerful and far-reaching. The stakes were even higher than he'd realized. Milo was in the grip of an organization that might very well be impossible to fight, but that didn't mean he was giving up. He left the library with renewed urgency, heading straight to his garage. If he was going to stand any chance of rescuing Mila, he'd need a plan and the right equipment. He rifled through his father's old tools, searching for anything that might come in handy. The garage was filled with decades-old mechanical equipment, remnants of his father's repair business that he had never gotten around to organizing. His hand landed on an old police scanner his father had once used to keep track of local emergencies. Josh didn't know much about electronics, but he remembered his father mentioning that the scanner could pick up signals far beyond what the typical radio could handle. He fired it up, listening to the static crackle, and adjusted the dial to see if he could pick up anything unusual. For hours he listened, his fingers moving over the controls, trying every frequency he could think of. Just as he was about to give up, a faint, distorted voice came through the static, barely discernible. Commission. Capture confirmed. Relocate subject. Earth sector. The words were barely audible, cutting in and out, but they were enough to confirm Josh's worst fears. The voice was speaking about Mila, and from what he could gather, they were planning to move her to a different location. Desperation clawed at him as he considered his options. He had no idea where Mila was being held or how to find her, but he knew that if he waited too long, she'd be lost forever. He decided he'd take the truck and start searching the outskirts of town. If they were planning to relocate her, they'd need a vehicle, and if he was lucky, he might be able to spot it. He drove through the night, scanning the empty roads, his eyes sharp for any sign of activity. Hours passed, the sky growing lighter as dawn approached, but there was nothing, no vehicles, no movement, no trace of Mila or her captors. Just as he was about to lose hope, a glint of metal caught his eye. Off the side of an isolated road, half hidden by trees, was a dark vehicle parked in a secluded spot. His pulse quickened as he slowed the truck and parked at a distance, watching carefully. Sure enough, 3 figures were clustered around the car, one of them wearing the same sharp, dark suit he'd seen on the man who had confronted them at the communicator site. Josh's mind raced. He had to get close without being seen, but he knew he had to act fast. The men seemed preoccupied, possibly preparing for transport. Taking a deep breath, Josh quietly exited his truck and crept toward them, keeping low and moving as quietly as he could. As he approached, he saw Mila. She was handcuffed, her face pale but defiant, standing between 2 of the men as they argued over some kind of device. Josh scanned his surroundings, his gaze landing on a nearby branch, a sturdy fallen limb long enough to serve as a makeshift weapon. Silently, he picked it up, gripping it tightly. One of the men was distracted, glancing at a tablet screen that emitted a soft glow. In a swift, desperate move, Josh lunged forward, swinging the branch at the man's head. The blow landed with a satisfying crack, sending the man sprawling to the ground. Before the others could react, Josh grabbed Mila's arm, pulling her to her feet. "Run," he hissed, pulling her toward the trees. But they didn't get far. A hand seized his shoulder, yanking him back with brute force. He stumbled, and a sharp pain exploded in his side as one of the men drove a knee into his ribs. Mila cried out, but she was quickly restrained by another of the men who held a metallic device to her neck, emitting a low hum that seemed to drain her strength. Josh struggled, kicking and swinging as the men restrained him, but their strength was overwhelming. Just when he thought all hope was lost, a loud beeping sound echoed from one of the men's devices, a signal that seemed to catch them off guard. They exchanged a quick, panicked look, loosening their grip on him. "This location's compromised," one of the men said, his voice tight. "We need to move." The other man cursed under his breath, looking at Mila with a mixture of frustration and resignation. "Consider yourself lucky, human," he sneered at Josh, shoving him to the ground. "But we'll be back for her. And next time you won't interfere." With that, the men released Mila, retreating to their vehicle and speeding off into the dawn, leaving Josh and Mila gasping for breath in the dust. Josh staggered to his feet, his side aching, and helped Mila up, relief flooding through him as he saw she was unharmed. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Myla nodded, her eyes fierce despite the ordeal. "I'm fine, thanks to you." They stood there, the early morning sun casting a warm light over the landscape. Josh knew their ordeal was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope. They had managed to escape, and together, he was certain they could face whatever came next. The heart of danger. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a bright light over the open landscape, Josh and Miller found themselves in a tense silence, grappling with the aftermath of their harrowing encounter. The adrenaline from the confrontation was still coursing through Josh's veins, but the victory of having escaped Zessie's agents felt hollow, without a clear plan for what came next. "Miller, we need to move," Josh said, breaking the silence. "They're not going to stop. We can't stay here." Myla nodded, her expression a mixture of determination and fear. "You're right. We have to put some distance between us and that spot. They'll likely regroup and come looking for us. I know a place not far from here, a small cabin my family used for retreats. It's isolated, and we can stay off the radar there." "Then let's go," Josh replied, feeling a sense of urgency settle in. They quickly made their way back to the truck, the weight of the communicator still heavy in Josh's backpack. He didn't know if it would help them communicate with Salara or act as a beacon for Zessie's agents, but he had to find out. As they drove, Mela pointed out landmarks, her eyes brightening with each familiar sight. The cabin was nestled in a secluded area surrounded by dense woods, a place she had cherished as a child. "It's just a few miles ahead," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "It's a small wooden structure, but it should be safe for now." After what felt like an eternity, they finally arrived at the cabin. The sight of it, a quaint wooden structure adorned with creeping vines and surrounded by towering pines, was both comforting and eerie in its isolation. Josh parked the truck, and they climbed out, taking a moment to absorb their surroundings. The cabin was simple yet charming, with a porch that overlooked a sparkling lake shimmering under the midday sun. Despite the beauty, Josh couldn't shake the feeling that danger lurked nearby. "We should check the perimeter," he suggested, glancing around the secluded area. "Make sure we're not followed." "Good idea," Myla replied, her expression serious as they moved cautiously around the cabin. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the calls of distant birds, and the soft lapping of water against the shore. It felt peaceful, but Josh knew better than to let his guard down. After a thorough inspection, they returned to the cabin, locking the door behind them. Inside, it was rustic but cozy, with a fireplace, a small kitchen, and a couple of warm couches. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, filtering through the windows, giving the space a warm, homey feel. Josh could see why Myla had cherished this place. "Myla, we should try to reach your people," he said, setting his backpack down. "If the communicator works, maybe we can contact the resistance and find out how to protect you from Zizi." "Okay," she replied, her gaze intense. "But we need to be careful. Using it could attract attention, especially if they're still tracking me." Josh nodded, knowing the risks, but the thought of Myla being hunted made his blood boil. "Let's just test it. We can keep the signal low, and if we can get through, it might give us a fighting chance." Myla took a deep breath, her fingers trembling slightly as she activated the communicator. The device hummed to life, casting a soft blue glow in the dim cabin. Myla's eyes widened with both excitement and anxiety as she navigated the controls. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll send a signal to the resistance. If they're out there, they'll pick it up. Just stay close to me." Josh positioned himself beside her, watching intently as she worked. The communicator emitted a series of beeps, and Myla's face reflected determination mixed with fear. After what felt like an eternity, she finally pressed a button to send the signal. "Signal sent," she breathed, looking at Josh with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Now we wait." They spent the next few minutes in tense silence, listening for any response. Josh felt a strange connection to Mila in that moment, standing shoulder to shoulder as they faced the uncertainty ahead. He wanted to reassure her, to promise that everything would be all right, but the reality of their situation weighed heavily on him. Just as doubt began to creep in, a series of rapid beeps came from the communicator, making both their hearts leap. Mila's eyes lit up, and she quickly adjusted the settings. "It's them," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with hope. "I can hear them." The communicator crackled to life, a garbled voice breaking through the static. Mila, is that you? We received your signal. Are you safe?" Mila's heart raced. "I'm here. I'm safe, but I need help. Zacy's agents found me. I'm hiding on Earth, and they're searching for me. We need to escape." There was a pause, then the voice continued, more urgent. "We're aware of Zacy's pursuit. You must stay hidden. We'll send reinforcements, but we need time. Where are you?" "By the lake, in the cabin," Mila replied, her hands trembling with both fear and excitement. "I'm with a friend, Josh. He's helping me." Josh felt a surge of pride at her words, knowing that he was now part of her fight. The voice on the communicator acknowledged his presence. "Listen carefully. We'll track your location. If they're closing in, you need to prepare to move immediately. Is there a safe route?" Josh glanced at Mila, who nodded. "There's a path through the woods. It leads to a nearby road. If we can reach it, we might find a way to signal for a pickup." "Good. Keep the communicator close, and don't attract attention. We'll contact you as soon as we can. Stay safe, both of you." With that, the line went dead, leaving Josh and Mila in silence, the weight of their reality crashing down once more. "We have to get moving," Josh said, urgency filling his voice. "We can't stay here." "Right," Mila replied, her expression resolute. "We should pack and head toward the path I mentioned." They gathered their things quickly, stuffing essentials into their bags, each moment filled with a mix of hope and dread. The cabin that had once felt like a refuge now seemed like a trap, one they needed to escape before it was too late. As they stepped outside, the air felt thick with tension. The forest loomed around them, its shadows deepening as the sun dipped lower in the sky. They moved cautiously, sticking to the trees as they made their way toward the path Mela had mentioned. Josh's senses were on high alert, and he felt every rustle of leaves and distant sound magnified by the fear coursing through him. After several minutes of careful navigation, they finally reached the path. Narrow and overgrown, it led deeper into the woods. They started walking, the branches scratching at their arms as they made their way through the thick underbrush. Josh kept glancing back, half expecting to see Zezzy's agents lurking behind them. "Do you think they'll find us?" Mela asked, her voice low. "I don't know," Josh replied, trying to remain calm. "But we have to keep moving. If we can get to that road, we'll have a better chance of getting help." Just as they reached a clearing, a noise echoed through the trees, a distant rumble of engines, getting closer. Josh's heart sank as he exchanged a worried glance with Mila. "They're coming. We need to hurry." They pushed forward, their pace quickening as they reached the edge of the forest. The sound of the engines grew louder, sending adrenaline surging through Josh. They emerged onto a small dirt road, the horizon open and vulnerable. "Where do we go?" Mila asked, her breath quickening as she scanned the area for any signs of safety. "We wait for a vehicle," Josh said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "If we can flag someone down, maybe we can get to the nearest town and find a way to contact your people again." They crouched by the side of the road, hearts pounding in their chests as they strained to hear any approaching vehicles. Minutes felt like hours, and the weight of anxiety pressed heavily upon them. Suddenly, the distant sound of tires crunching against gravel made them both tense. A truck appeared on the horizon, barreling down the dirt road. Josh's heart raced as he stood up, waving his arms desperately. "Stop, please," he shouted, trying to catch the driver's attention. The truck slowed, and Josh felt a flicker of hope as it pulled over to the side. The driver, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and kind eyes, peered out. "What's going on?" he asked, concern etching his features. "We need help," Mila said, stepping forward. "We're in danger. Please, can you take us to the nearest town?" The man's expression shifted from concern to alarm, and Josh could sense the uncertainty in him. "Danger? What kind of danger?" "It's complicated," Josh interjected, glancing back toward the woods. "We can explain on the way. Please, we don't have much time." After a moment's hesitation, a man nodded. "All right, get in, but you better explain everything as we drive." Relief flooded through Josh as they climbed into the truck, and he felt Mila's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. They were moving, but the danger was still very real. As they drove down the dirt road, Josh quickly relayed their story to the driver, omitting details that might raise suspicion. They shared just enough to make their situation clear without revealing too much, and the man listened intently, his grip tightening on the steering wheel as he processed their words. "We're not far from town," he said, glancing back at them. "But if you're being chased, I'll need to drop you off somewhere safe. The local diner has a back room you can use. They know me there." "Thank you," Mila said, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. "We just need a moment to figure things out." As the truck bumped along the rough terrain, Josh felt the weight of uncertainty settle on his shoulders again. They had escaped one danger, but what awaited them in town? And what if Zessie's agents had followed them? Minutes later, they rolled into Sunridge, the familiar streets now feeling strangely foreign. The diner loomed ahead, a beacon of hope in their turbulent world. The driver parked and helped them out, glancing around as if to ensure no one was watching. "Stay low, and don't attract attention," he whispered as they slipped inside. Inside the diner, the comforting scent of coffee and fried food greeted them, but Josh felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. They headed to the back, where the driver spoke briefly with the owner, a friendly woman named Grace, who quickly ushered them to a small room behind the kitchen. "Stay here," she instructed, closing the door behind them. "I'll get you some food and drinks. You two look like you've been through hell." "Thank you," Josh said, his voice filled with sincerity. "We really appreciate it." As they waited, Josh and Mila exchanged worried glances, the reality of their situation pressing down on them. They were safe for now, but the threat was far from over. "Mila, what's our next move?" Josh asked, his voice low. "We can't stay here forever." Mila took a deep breath, her expression resolute. "We need to contact the resistance again. The sooner we get the help we need, the better. They might have resources or safe houses we can use." Josh nodded, his mind racing. "Right. If we can get the communicator working again, we might be able to reach them before Zazie finds us." Just then, Grace returned with 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a plate piled high with food. "You two eat up," she said, placing the food in front of them. "You look like you need it. And don't worry, you're safe here. Just lay low until things settle down." "Thank you, Grace," Mila said, her eyes shining with gratitude as they dug into the food. For a brief moment, the comfort of warmth and nourishment chased away the fear. But Josh knew they couldn't let their guard down completely. They ate quickly, discussing their next steps between bites. As they finished, the communicator hummed softly in Josh's bag, reminding him of their mission. "Are you ready to try again?" Mila asked, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Yes," Josh replied, heart racing. "Let's see if we can get in touch with your people once more, but we need to be cautious." After ensuring the door was securely closed, they set up the communicator on the small table in the room, its glow casting a soft light around them. With trembling hands, Mila adjusted the settings, and Josh held his breath as she initiated the connection. The device crackled to life, and moments later, the same voice they had spoken to earlier came through, tinged with urgency. "Maya, we've been trying to reach you. What's your status?" Mila's voice shook with emotion. "I'm here. We've had some close calls, but I'm with a friend, and we're safe for now. Please, I need help. Zessie's agents are still pursuing me. Stay hidden for the moment, the voice instructed. We're tracking your location, but we need to act fast. If Zessie's agents are aware of your presence, they'll come looking for you again. Can you get to the rendezvous point we discussed? Myla looked at Josh, and he nodded, determination setting in. Yes, we can get there. Just tell us where. The voice provided them with coordinates and explained how to reach a nearby safe house. We'll send a team to extract you, but you need to move quickly. Don't stay in one place for too long. Josh and Myla exchanged a glance, a surge of hope coursing through them. They had a plan, a chance to escape Zessie's grasp. But even as they felt a flicker of relief, the fear of being caught lingered in the back of Josh's mind. As they prepared to leave the diner, Josh couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They stepped into the bustling main area, and Josh kept his eyes peeled for any sign of danger. The townsfolk went about their day, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Stick close to me, Josh whispered to Myla, his protective instincts flaring up again. If we're spotted, we need to act fast. With their bags slung over their shoulders, they made their way out the door, hearts pounding as they stepped into the sunlight. The road ahead stretched out before them, filled with uncertainty, but together, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did they know, however, that danger was closer than they realized, and Zessie's agents were already on their trail.